Hello, how's it going everyone? So in this video, we're gonna be talking about the areas to scale, how to unlock scale, why do some businesses go from 6 figures to 7 figures to 8 to 9-figure brands, and sort of how to think about this, what's the learning curve when it comes to that, and how do I sort of give this example towards my clients and pretty much do it for them in the first place along with my team. So I'm gonna give you guys the exact frameworks that I kind of look at to better understand what is happening inside of their business. And I'm gonna be a little blunt and honest when it comes to this, so let's dive into it. Okay, so the first thing here is we have two representations of a scaling wall. So let's think about this first. Let's think, okay, what is a scaling wall? Well, a scaling wall is a point where you're trying to scale and you run into a wall. You can't spend more at the goals or the KPIs that you have set. So an example that I like to say is if my KPI is a 3x and I'm trying to scale, I can't scale past a wall and it's typically lower. But if my overall efficiency can be at a 1x, my wall opens up a lot more. Now, the idea here is that the more leverage that we give the algorithms, the better that they will perform for our business at a scaling perspective. Now, there is a balance there, right? So we don't want to just be in a scenario where you're scaling and you're barely profitable, whereas you can spend the same amount previously and, be more profitable in the first place from a net profit perspective, not from a, ad spend to ROAS perspective. And so this example here sort of gives the concept of, if I scale more, I might be making less per sale, but the volume of scale will equate more dollars to me than if I were to stay at efficiency. So in this scenario, it's like if we want to be efficient, we'll make $6. Okay, cool. If we want to scale at maximum push, meaning like as close to the margin as possible, we might make $7. I think this is $7. And so in this scenario, you would obviously want to push towards margin as much as possible on your products. Even if you're making 10%, because the volume of scale outweighs the efficiency that you would get on sticking to higher margin or sticking to an area where you feel a lot safer with the overall distance from your margin based on the products. And so this is sort of the beginning stages of it. Now, once you kind of find the balance between these two and you have a stable number on a general average, I like to throw the next thing into the equation, which is LTV. So LTV is a very, very important factor when it comes to a lot of businesses. And this is where I personally get a lot of leverage from marketing, because marketing tends to be misallocated from a new customer acquisition perspective, right? So I would say, taking everything out of the equation, your goal as a marketer 99.999% of the time is to get more new customers at a profitable rate for the business, because that's how you grow a business, right? Pretty straightforward there. And so the biggest issue though is that when we are looking at acquisition inside of the platforms, it blends both return and new users or new customers in there. The reason why it will actually prioritize warm traffic or repeat users, which is your LTV, lifetime value of a customer, is because they're showing signals that they want to convert, and the algorithm doesn't know every single individual as well as we think it does, right? It doesn't know that they're a repeat customer. It's just going after purchasers, right? Or it's going after like the third click that looks like a new customer, not the first click. It's not leading the charge. It's kind of just scooping up data where it can. And so what tends to happen is that you end up scaling, but you're scaling based off of the margin of your repeat customers, not your new customers. This is probably the most important thing. And so if we can leverage pushing more ad spend towards new customers, then we'll have more profitability on the back end from an LTV perspective. I like to allow repeat customers to come more so from email versus ad spend. Now, I'm not saying that ad spend is going to be 100% cold. That's impossible, especially if you're using conversion-based bidding, because it will still go after repeat users. Even if you have all the cold tactics set up for it, all the cold signals, you're running CAPI imports, you're doing everything in your possible ability to gear the algorithm towards new customers, the issue still comes down to you're still going to get some warm traffic. Now, instead of it being, let's just say 50% warm and 50% cold, now it's 80% cold and 20% warm. So there's, these scenarios that come up a lot where we're still remarketing, we're still retargeting people in the LTV. We're just trying to minimize it as much as possible because we want to be as profitable profitable as possible from an LTV perspective. So why do we want to do that in the first place? Well, what that allows us to do is it allows us to get cash flow from another source that we don't even have to allocate marketing to in the first place. Maybe it's email. Let's just say it's a very minimal amount of spend. And so what that then means is that these users that are in our LTV are extremely profitable for our business from a margin perspective, right? We're not putting any ad spend towards them. We're just taking the margin when they come back to the business. Now, this is not to say that we're going to have a ton of margin from this. Obviously, your LTV might not be, it might be 10% of your customers, it might be 50% of your customers. It really just depends on your business model. The same thing goes for lead gen as well too. Like referrals is kind of an angle you can save LTV. And so what that means is that if we take LTV into account and we put it up here, then that moves our scaling wall up further, right? So we're putting more cash available in order for us to push the algorithm further. So this is where things get a little bit complicated, and I wanna go through this to make sure that we understand it. So the goal here of scaling is to acquire more new customers, not repeat customers. Now, we can acquire repeat customers, but our goal is to get more new customers at the most efficient rate possible. The main metrics to track for this are NMR, or AMR, whatever you want to call it. That is essentially, think of it as your global, across the entire business, what is your ROAS per se for new customers. So we're talking the entire volume of new customers and the entire ad spend from every single channel, from every source possible, right? We're not doing any attribution. We're looking at the totals of everything. So that is one of the metrics. The other metric that you can look at is NCAC, right? How much am I paying across the entire business for a new customer? And the reason why we want to do that is because that will tell us the efficiency of our scale in the first place. It's not going to give us the profitability per se or the AOV, but it's going to give us our baseline average when it comes to how much we're paying for a new customer. Now, I have had scenarios where if you have very different AOVs, this might not be the best metric to look at because you might not be profitable on one purchase, but then you might be profitable on the next purchase. So you have to kind of take into account based on your business model, which metric you should be focused more on whenever you're being a marketer per se. We're not talking about being in the weeds of understanding the exact profitability of the product. That is later and more complicated, probably in another video. That's more about, contribution margin. But anyways, I digress from that. So when it comes, so let's take it back to the scaling wall, right? So we pushed up the scaling wall due to our LTV. So our LTV has said, okay, let's say that my customer is worth $100. A new customer is worth $100. It's not to say that they bought $100. It's to say over the lifetime of that customer that has been with us, their LTV equals $100. So their first purchase all the way to as much as we know about all their other purchases. And the advantage of larger and businesses that have been around for longer is that they have a better understanding of their LTV, right? So if I've only been in business for like a year, I only have a year's worth of data on my LTV. But if there's a business that's been around for 20 years, they're going to know, oh yeah, they typically come back year 1 and then year 5 and then year 10 kind of thing. So we can kind of play out, the expectations that we'll see for the business. Now, so that's a big advantage when it comes to large businesses. And that's why it's important to track all this information as early as possible so you understand who exactly, is coming back and why are they coming back, so then you can better allocate ad spend towards, in the right direction per se and know your profitability. So what this means is that there is a time frame between the first purchase and the LTV. So this time frame, for example, I spend money up front and then I come back, let's say 3 months later. My total value now is $100. So like I said, the company is saying, okay, customers are worth $100 to us. That means that my overall targets, instead of it being the first purchase, it's actually the first purchase plus the LTV with that in mind. And so this allows us to stretch the value, or I guess the ability to scale further, right? We're taking less pressure off of the algorithm and the targets that is going to offset based off of volume, because when volume goes up, the idea here is that we will be making more dollars. We might be making, instead of $5 per product, we're making $1 per product, but we'll get more than $5 worth of product to be sold back, kind of thing. That's kind of the general mindset. And so what tends to happen though is people get excited about this and they say, oh, well, we can pay all this money for this LTV, so let's just pump it and let's just scale as far as possible. But then they forget cash flow is a problem, and we don't want to take out interest on a loan and run ourselves into the ground when it comes to bankruptcy. And so we want to be very careful whenever we're scaling this. And so what I tend to do in these scenarios is I stair step scale, so we give it enough time at each one of these intervals to capture its LTV if we are playing it up against the wall, kind of thing, when it comes to profitability. And as you develop this, you might say, oh, I can actually sell this bundle and that can shrink this time. So instead of it being a stair step like you see right here, it's maybe a stair step that's half of that time right here, right? Because higher AOV is going to be, tends to be at least, more profitability, which means that we can stretch ourselves a little bit further. And so that's why you see a lot of bundles in a lot of businesses, because they're trying to do this, at least smart businesses. This is, like I said, what takes people from 6 figures to 7 figures. Most 7-figure brands are already doing this in the first place. Either that or they just have a really high AOV product with great margins, then good for them. But every single 8-figure brand that I know of is taking this into account, no matter what the case is. And the 9-figure brands are the ones that pair extremely good finances with obviously really good marketing and have a good business model in the first place. But if you want to get to the point of even getting the 8 figures, if you have something that's working, you need to do this, because like I said, there's gonna be so many other people that are running businesses that I see fail all the time that are focused on this area over here. Oh, I need more money per product, and they forget there is a whole other game when it comes to understanding how much you can actually make from a sale in the first place. So anyways, I'm gonna leave it here. And like I said, let me know if you guys have any questions on this. Just to recap the calculations, or I guess not the calculations, the terms, you can just look these up or even pump it in a chat GPT and it'll tell you right away. But NCAC is really good for businesses that have very similar AOVs or have a lot higher LTVs. So we're looking more at LTV than the first order. Typically subscription-based businesses supplement brands, things of that nature. And NCAC tends to be a lot easier to scale than something like NMR or AMR. So how much are you paying? AMR, NMR is how much are you paying essentially for, or what is your global ROAS per se for new customers? And then that will give you kind of based on the AOV and the understanding of, okay, globally, this is our, overall efficiency based on the AOV, assuming that you have very similar profitabilities, if not the exact same profitability, you would use that. Now, when it gets more complex, and like I said, this is more of a separate video, and this would probably not be something that you want to hand calculate. You probably want to have an algorithm doing this for you, is looking at your overall contribution margin per product, right? Or your profitability per product. And so what that means is you might have a product that's getting pushed that's not as profitable. It's like a 10% margin versus a 40% margin, but they both have the same AOV. Obviously, you want to push the one that has the better margin. So we're also taking that into account when we look at this, but I just, like I said, want to give you guys the simple calculations first to sort of put you in the ballpark of what we like to do when it comes to marketing, how we do it for our clients, how we teach in our school community, so we get to the point of success where people can push their brands from 6, 7, 8, 9-figure brands, kind of thing. So anyways, if you don't believe me, check out our other channel, CProGrowth. We have evidence of this happening all the time. We own e-commerce brands as well too, so we practice what we preach, kind of thing. And it's an area that I would highly recommend you look at if you have not looked at before, because you will learn a lot. I've learned a lot in the past 5 years, and it's been a journey when it comes to this, but this is the model when it comes to scaling a business. So anyways, thanks again, and I appreciate you guys. I'll see you guys in the next video.